Well, as we have heard, U.S. bases under fire in the Middle East. International shipping also being attacked by the Houthis, and the issue of aid to Ukraine. Let's bring in Jack Keane, retired four-star Army General, Fox News senior strategic analyst. General, always good to see you. First, let's go to Ukraine. The sudden invitation from President Biden to President Zelenskyy to also brief the Senate on Tuesday, obviously tied to the border security negotiations that continue to threaten the funding of arms for Ukraine. Why, in your view, is this issue so pressing and this invitation so important, as we've just heard, coming up so suddenly?
Yeah, well, President Zelenskyy was scheduled to brief the Senate virtually, obviously in a classified briefing last week, and he was not able to do that given to some things that are occurring internally on the battlefield, is what we were told. So this is actually even better that the president has invited him to come and talk to the Senate, but also talk to the president. Look, the president put on the table Ukraine funding, Israeli funding, and also the border. And as a result of that, this is a policy of choice by the president that we know, Fox has been exposing it for 3 years, that we have an open border. There's no denying that. And I think what the Republicans are trying to tell us, and I agree with them, the national security starts at our own border. And we've got to fix this problem, as we've been identifying, with 12,000 people showing up every single day. I mean, that is a hemorrhage that's got to get fixed. And certainly the president has got to make some kind of accommodation here to improve that situation. I certainly would rather Ukraine not be a bargaining chip in all of this, because the national security world will just blow up. If we stop funding Ukraine, Euros will do some of that themselves. We'd likely lose there. And we know what's going to happen if Russia wins in Ukraine. They're going to continue to take advantage of the U.S. vulnerability and U.S. decline in Eastern Europe. President Xi will be incentivized for sure. He's already threatening war. And look at the Middle East. Is Iran going to be incentivized even more? If the United States, after surrendering Afghanistan, loses in Ukraine? Certainly. This is something we have to avoid, and we also have to fix the border. I'm hoping that the president gets the message loud and clear from President Zelenskyy about Ukraine security, but also gets out there and fixes U.S. security as well.
You're giving a very loud and clear message about that. And tell us about what's been called the catastrophic effects if Ukraine funding runs out. Pentagon has been saying they've been running out of money. Some of the ammunition, arms, been running low in order to try and resupply Ukraine. What would it mean if they don't come to a deal and Ukraine does not get what it needs to survive and Putin wins?
Well, that's what I just said. I mean, if Putin wins, not only does Russia win, so does China and so does Iran. We have to see that these things are connected. We have war in two of our geographical vital interest areas, the Middle East and Europe. The third vital interest area, identified by back-to-back presidents, is obviously the Indo-Pacific region. President Xi is threatening war in it. He's increased his aggression 4 or 5 times what it had been in the past in the last 2 years. I think he would be incentivized to move on that if the United States gave up in Ukraine and the Euros followed likewise, which some of them would do. If we lost Ukraine, Russia is on the move. And you know, it comes down to, Eric, what kind of a world do we really want to live in? Do we want to live in a world where our adversaries are setting the strategic agenda and the strategic framework, that the oppressors are pushing the agenda here, and all we're doing is trying to defend against that, as opposed to the United States stepping forward as a global leader to make sure the oppressors are contained and fundamentally deterred? And that's where we got to be.
And finally, Iran, clearly continually a threat, back in the Houthis. And the Houthis have said, all bets are off. They're going to attack any ship, any cargo ship, oil tanker, any ship that is going to dock at an Israeli port. Ronald Reagan, he flagged tankers and cargo ships back in the Iran tanker wars of the 80s, took very decisive, strong steps. Are we doing enough now to deter those military attacks on our troops? And how do we defeat and defend against the Houthis and the mullahs in Tehran?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be following foreign policy and national security closely to come to the conclusion that we aren't doing nearly enough here. It is absolutely insufficient. In my judgment, I think it's reckless that we're not standing up here and making certain that our national interests and our troops are going to be protected in the region. It's not enough just to defend against a drone and a rocket or a missile that is coming at our troops or coming at a ship. We've got to get on the offense, and yes, we have to escalate to gain dominance. That's the reality of it. You mentioned what Reagan did in the 80s. He escalated to gain dominance. He hit oil platforms and the patrol base from which the attacks were coming from. IRGC. He hit Iran. Trump did the same thing by hitting the IRGC Quds Force leader. They both escalated to gain dominance, and it worked. It's not that Iran wouldn't respond, they would, but it's likely they're going to shut down. Why? Because they want to avoid a war with the United States. What's happening here is the White House, I'm convinced based on my sources, is paralyzed by the fear of us escalating would lead to a direct confrontation with Iran. The history of 43 years of dealing with Iran does not support that assumption. Why? Because they use their proxies to do all their dirty work for them. They are out there pressing the United States to push us out of the region. They're out there using their proxies to weaken and destroy the state of Israel. They do not want to be involved directly themselves. Why? Because they knew they lose. What do they lose? They lose their regime. They're not going to go there. Let's use our head about it, find a little spine to go with our head, and let's get on with protecting our troops and protecting our interest in the region.
As so often, General Jack Keane brings us sage, perceptive wisdom. He knows firsthand about America's foes and the threats we face. General Keane, always good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, great talking to you, Eric. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.